Hello and welcome to the Political Opinions podcast, where every opinion is given equal footing and political tolerance and debate are given their proper attention in a world where both are on the decline. Today's episode will cover different opinions on state religion. Throughout history, there has always been a strong link between a state and its religion. Almost every civilization, from the Romans to medieval Europe to the Far East in Asia, had a strong fusion of religion and state. Both were equally important and almost always depended on one another for their own survival. All this would begin to change, however, with the period known as the Enlightenment, and around then also the Reformation, but that was a slightly different issue. Since these points, however, the idea of a state adopting and following a religion has largely declined, with it being seen as an outdated system. That being said, there are still many states in the world which have either adopted a state religion or are so closely tied to one they may as well be. Why, you may ask? Well, today we will unpack and compare these opinions. Now let's start with the most important idea, and the one that really underpins everything. The idea that religion is inherently good. You really need that if you're going to have a state religion. Religion, to many people, is an incredibly important aspect of their lives. To some, they argue it brings value and meaning to life, teaches essential moral truths, and promotes positive ethics. Now the key point here is that it promotes good morals. It goes without saying that humans have not always done what we might call good deeds, and there are many instances, such as say Nazi Germany, which perfectly exhibit the dangers that untouched human nature can really expose, I guess. Religion, by contrast, is arguably a source of good. They push charity, peace, love, and in doing so can curtail the dangerous side to humanity. And by curtailing this dangerous side, a state religion can help promote positive decision making that is free from political influence and populism. Many politicians today make morally questionable decisions that, once clear of the political language they use, clearly serves nothing more than their own electoral or political interests. Religion will curtail this by enforcing a set of morals and beliefs that are present with all government decisions and actions. This can be mostly felt with the passing of laws, dangerous laws that promote violence, persecution, segregation, and so on, will very likely interfere with modern religious moral views. If this contest arises, and there is a need to follow religious teachings, then there is a belief that laws will be better for society and promote more positive ideals. Now, if we were to take the opposition side of this, in a world where religion and state are separate, we see some other dangers. First of all, there is a risk of divisions emerging within society. Not every law, action, and decision made by a state will agree with a certain religion, and when such conflict arises, religious people must ultimately take a side. The church could become a political weapon to foster opposition to the state, meaning it is now used for bad rather than the apparent utopia some would say a state religion could bring. It gets worse from there too. This separate world also causes problems for religious state employees, for example. Public sector workers will be forced to separate work and religion within their lives if they are not allowed to, say, spread the religion through schools or other state apparatus. This hampers both their freedom of religion and causes practical issues. On the flip side, however, some would say freedom of religion can occur better within a state religion. It just means one religion is adopted by the government. And what really nails this point down essentially is the view that if such a large proportion of a population follows one religion or one kind of group of religions, let's say the Protestant churches, some would say it makes sense for the state to adopt said church as a result. Let's round out this side then by thinking, of course, of the children. Religion is arguably very important for children, teaching them religious morals and ethics, as well as how to live a good life, and that is very important for their future development. As a result, some would say it is important to have a state religion and teach children about it from a young age in order to experience the most benefits when they grow up. It's a real catch-all strategy if you think about it. God is not great. That is the title of a book written by the famed anti-religious author Christopher Hitchens. He argued, as many others have, that religion is not all good. Many of the most horrendous acts of violence and hatred in the past have had religion at their centre. Even today, people continue to kill themselves and others in the name of religion, and as such, some believe that religion today, in many cases, should only exist in the private sphere, not the state sphere at least, where it is free to exist without risks to wider society. Now this point extends to religious morals. Not all religious teachings are objectively good, and in many cases they can be subjective and potentially harmful to certain groups of people. For example, radical Islam, as well as radical Christianity, contain many teachings that are almost universally unpopular beyond the members of their religion. The key difference here is that most non-believers don't believe in killing these religious people to spread such lovely ideas. All of this means that religious backing for decisions is not as simple as checking off a morals and ethics box. Decisions should always be made from experience and deductive reasoning to best approach the specific situation at hand, and should not be limited by an ever-present religious perspective. A religion might view the response to a situation very differently to an objective onlooker due to different perspectives. Decisions should be made free from influence, in this case, free from the influence of religion. This is again seen prominently in the laws that are passed. Religion can act as a barrier to effective lawmaking. If a certain law is required for the betterment of society, but conflicts with religious teachings, then there is a serious conflict of interests. The idea of boosting, for example, disposable income during recessions to foster economic growth would conflict greatly with the medieval religious teaching of a tithe tax to the church. No wonder there were so many peasants. Now, speaking of medieval times, anyone who has studied any medieval king or queen will likely have heard of the idea of divine right. Essentially, people claim that God has given them permission to rule, and as such to go against their rule is to go against God. This is both dangerous as it promotes dictatorships and contradictory, given warring kings were almost always both supported by God, just as in battle, which is a bit odd, but we'll ignore that fact. Anyway, removing religion and state from each other means that nobody can claim legitimacy off of God alone, but rather being elected, at least in democracies. Now let's come back to this idea of radical religion, particularly the practice of forcing it onto non-believers. With a state religion, this could occur on a much wider scale. Governments could force religion onto people, and many religions simply don't like each other. For example, hasn't happened yet, but probably will, but if we go back to pre-9/11 Taliban rule, for example, they forced extreme severe Sharia law on all of the people of Afghanistan, regardless of their beliefs. Even in countries that aren't necessarily considered dangerous, but still religiously extreme, like Saudi Arabia, it is illegal to spread teachings of, for example, Christianity, and the Islamic State, the lovely people I know, have murdered anyone who wasn't in their religion. None of these situations are particularly attractive, to me at least. And then finally, let's once again think of the children. In this case, their future freedom of thought. Heavily teaching one or a group of certain religious ideas could in many cases be likened to indoctrination, and many people are understandably opposed to the idea of their children being taught a certain religious doctrine without their consent. Let's take a look now at how these points stack up against one another. On the point of religion, pretty self-explanatory, but we have one group saying religion is very good and can be a positive to the state. It brings value to people's lives and promotes good ideas. Others, however, believe religion is potentially dangerous. There are many positive aspects, but there are also many negative aspects, and those negative aspects mean it shouldn't exist within the state complex. And then similarly, on the question of the morals of religion, some believe religious morals are inherently good and essential for a good state, society, and so on. Religion teaches love and peace and curtails man's immoral side. Others, however, believe religious morals can be extremely subjective and aren't necessarily better than non-religious human actions, and radical religion is often extremely unpopular beyond its members. Then on how this impacts decision-making generally within a state. Some believe religion ensures decisions are made in accordance with morals and ethics, and it prevents populist and potentially harmful state decisions. Others, however, argue state religion means decisions are made from perspective, not experience. Decisions should be made with an open mind and free from heavy influence. Now, of course, you could argue that ideology is very similar to religion in this regard, but that's not really the topic of this debate. Then, on the question of laws, some believe religion again curtails the risk of human nature creating dangerous laws, and means that laws passed are again morally and ethically sound. Others, however, believe religion can act as a barrier to effective lawmaking, and that necessary laws that conflict with the church may not be passed. On the question of legitimacy, some believe that separation of the church and state can create divisions within society, and if the church and state disagree, members are ultimately forced to pick a side, which kind of harms the legitimacy of a state by meaning that not everyone is aligned with it. Others, however, argue legitimacy is increased when we remove religion from the picture. Essentially, no one can claim to have a divine right to rule, and this is dangerous because, again, divine right means you're not elected off policies, but you're elected off religion and the word of God, or whatever God you believe in. On the question of how it impacts freedom of religion, some believe, for example, if we separate state and religion, state employees are forced to separate work and religion within their lives, and that state religion still allows people to have freedom of religion without creating this ever-present, if again the population is highly religious, conflict of interest between state and religion. Then, on the other side, some believe that freedom of religion could be challenged by state religion, because there is a risk governments will likely try to force religion onto their people, and that not all religions are capable of mutually coexisting. So if you're in a heavily, say, Islamic country that opposes other religions and you're a Christian, not going to be a great scenario to be in, let's be honest. And then finally, on the question of schools, some believe it's important to teach schools religion and spread awareness to children. It teaches important beliefs and morals which help in their future. Others, however, believe there is a risk and likelihood of indoctrination into certain religions via schools, and this limits children's freedom of religion, choice, and thought in their future. Overall, those supporting state religion believe that religion itself is inherently good, or at least one's own religion is good. Religion can be a buffer to the dangers of human nature and can serve to promote positive morals and ethics, while still allowing wider beliefs to exist. Others, however, believe that religion is not all good, and despite there being many positives to it, there are also immense risks associated with allowing one singular religion to dominate the infrastructure of a state. With state religion, there is still just as high a risk of bad actions occurring as a state without religion. Despite the continued separation of religion and state in many Western countries, religion continues to play a very important role in many people's lives. However, recent numbers have signalled a younger generation less inclined to be religious, so it will be interesting to see what happens in the future if this trend continues, and religion's global influence continues its slow but steady decline. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments or on Twitter. Be sure to check back next Monday for another episode. Thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you soon.